here on the new Design for Living, reimagining how we live, love, and treat each other. And of course, the idea of how we live is a broad one by intention. And I'm super excited to have my very special guest in the studio today. He's the director of Advocacy and Outreach for the Balneology Association of North America. Welcome to the show, Chris Devlin.
Hi, Camille.
I get to bring another friend onto the show, one of the gold nuggets in our community, a very wise man with tremendous information. And I really had to decide where we were going to go today because you do have a lot of very unique information and experience and wisdom. But I want to talk about water because you're a water steward, and I want to get into water. I want to get into, soaking in mineral hot springs and all the great information that you bring with us today. I do want to start with the name, though, because I know, is it a Latin root?
Yes. The balneology comes from the Latin root balneum, which means bath. And it's the study of bathing, particularly in the Earth's natural mineral waters. So
you've been on the board for this nonprofit for about 15 years now. Is that when your personal relationship began with hot springs? Tell us a little bit about how that happened for you personally.
This will bring us right into the spiritual connections with water and some of those other pathways that you're talking about. We might be able to go down. But back in 1974, I had a near-death experience, and that was before they coined that phrase. Moody wrote that phrase, NDE, a year later. So I felt pretty alone back then, but I would go around to all the fundamentalist churches and say, there is no fire and brimstone. It's all love. It's all, because you have this experience where you see your connection to everything, and it kind of changes how you see things. And so it was that time when I first left Connecticut to hitchhike up to Alaska in 1974. And so on that trip, actually on the return trip, I was hitchhiking back and asked the driver if we could stop because on the map I saw this little trail going off the road to a place called Liard Hot Springs. And Liard is now a provincial park and big, but at that time it was just a source spring up in the woods, and you had to hike into it. And I remember asking the driver if it was okay if we stopped and hiked in that trail. And he was kind of nervous because he was trying to get to Fargo, North Dakota in 72 hours from Tok. But we pulled over and hiked in, and I'm looking at it, and I said, I'm going in. And I said, you going in? He goes, no, I don't have my suit. I said, I don't either. And so I stripped down and jumped in. He's looking at me like, who's this guy who picked up hitchhiking?
And can I leave him here?
He's getting naked and jumping in a hot spring. I got in. And, a lot of people I know, can feel energy. And I might be a little too thick to feel a lot of energy, but I felt that. And I said, whoa. I told the guy, I said, you better just get in here. So he stripped down and jumped in. And we soaked for about an hour. And that was my first experience.
And what was that feeling?
Oh, it was connection to spirit. I just come off this connection with the near death and how you're connected to everything. And this seemed to be a way to do that. It just brings you right to that connection of the frequency of God, the frequency of love. Yeah, it blew me away.
Wow.
And I've been soaking ever since.
And when and how did you find out about this nonprofit?
The founder of the nonprofit, her name was Cynthia. She called me, and she wanted to get some health providers on it. I'm a family nurse practitioner, and so she contacted me and my colleague, Marcus Copland, who's probably the leading physician in hot springs soaking in the country today, contacted both of us and asked us if we would get on the board, and so we did.
And so it's 75 when you have your first hot springs?
74.
74. Yep. And when did it happen next?
Oh, I'm not sure. I in the 70s, I went to some in Colorado. In the 80s. I went to one with my wife, Joan, in 81. And I started wherever I was traveling. I'd look around to see if there was any springs around.
That's really something. And we're going to pick up on this whole spiritual component in just a bit because that ties into a lot of what we want to talk about today, I was interested, and so I went to that website and I did more research on that wonderful nonprofit that studies, specifically bathing in mineral hot springs. It's got quite a history, and I didn't know about it, and I only know as much as I do because of your sharing. But let's talk a little bit about the history of hot springs in America.
A long time ago, the 1800s, they were big. Early 1900s, they were big. A lot of the hot springs west of the Mississippi were owned by physicians, and they would send their patients into their hot springs. And the prescription that you would write for a hot spring included three things: the temperature of the bath, the duration of the bath, and the chemistry of the water. And so they'd always usually recommend their own water. And so it was how long at what temperature, and that you would do soaks. And usually the soaks were about a half hour, and you would do that repeated times during a day.
Okay, hold on a second. I think that this is kind of blowing my mind. So 1864, right around the Civil War, right? So the story goes that, we're finding these hot springs. Mm-hmm. However, of course, Native Americans knew of them prior to that time. Is that an accurate historical statement?
Yeah. All indigenous cultures all over the world were using this. And you go way back. I was recently soaking at Lolo Hot Springs in Montana, and got to see where Lewis and Clark kind of walked across. And in one of the journals, they talked about how the tribe would soak in the hot water and then go jump in the river.
Wow.
Well, today we call that contrast bathing.
Exactly.
And there's big controversies. Do you finish with the cold or do you finish with the hot? Well, the tribes would finish with the hot.
And when you talk about doctors, are we talking about throughout the country, primarily on the West Coast? Where?
No, it was throughout the country.
Okay.
In the East Coast, you had to boost the water a little bit. Saratoga Springs in New York was very famous, but they'd heat the water up a little bit because it came out in the 70s.
And so you're talking about doctors in the late 1800s, early 1900s that owned these hot springs and wrote these prescriptions at the time?
Yeah, it was normal. It was normal. A lot of naturopathic type of approaches to healthcare was a lot more normal then. Then the famous Flexner report came out, which said that all medical schools should only teach allopathic or pharmacy-based medicine. That's what happened. They got shut down. They got told they couldn't do it. And that's when hot springs left becoming a medical practice to more of a spa experience where you put cucumbers on your eyes and relax. Mm-hmm. And you could do that, but you couldn't call it healing. You couldn't call it medicine because that became illegal.
Wow.
We're still reverberating with that today. Part of the work we do with the nonprofit is to bring back the rights of people to access the water for healing properties.
Because even at the Girdwood Spa, they've got the cold, they've got the hot, right? And it's under this title of spa.
Relaxation.
Sure.
Yeah, it's all good. And that's healing.
It is.
But it's not used, and everybody has to always put the disclaimer, it's not used as a primary care modality, and it should be.
Okay, so what is it about the water that is healing?
It's a difficult question to unpack, Camille, because we tend to think in terms of the way we've been brainwashed by pharma in the Western medicine that some little substance, some little thing is what does all the difference. You take a medicine, that's what got you better. And that's not the way it works. And so when you're dealing with water, we tend to focus on what are the substances in the water. Like we think of water as some inert kind of neutral carrying mechanism for whatever substances are in there. But that's really not it. It's deeply connected, spiritual, energized, charged. As you get down to the molecular level, there's a lot going on even before you add any substances into the water. So most of the early research when they were trying to keep mineral baths as a mode of acceptable medical practice, everyone tried to show how the mineral content of a given spring was good for this particular thing. And that's still today what's the driving thing behind most of the research in hot springs is what is your mineral content and how is that mineral absorbed through the skin into the body, and then they give the attribute the healing effects to that process. But people forgot that's kind of a big pharma bias of how you look at science. You have to kind of back up a little bit. The water itself has healing qualities from who knows how. But it seems to be when light first hit the water. We could diverge, and at any point I may go off on a rant, Camille, so you just have to wave your hand and say stop. But, we go back to our creation stories, right? And we have the creation stories where God separated the heaven and the earth, the heavens and the earth. Well, what does that mean? And then it said, and then looking down upon the waters or hovering over the waters, he said, let there be light. Okay, so we know he separated, and we know he said, let there be light, but he was looking at the waters. When were those created? It's almost like they're a mirror of what was above. And so when water comes into connection with light, a lot of stuff happens. And so my current thinking on the subject of what makes water healing is the activation of light in the water and how that responds to the water in us.
And so are we saying then that minerals themselves are light particles?
Then if you go far enough back, minerals in water are in the form of what's called a liquid crystal. And the liquid crystal has frequency, has charge.
Wow.
And so how does water get its charge? The thinking is that light impacts the charge of water. And then you go down the rabbit hole of molecular structure, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. And you go down to the different charges within the water. And when you're there, you're pretty much at frequency. You're pretty much at vibration. And so when you get to the frequency of water, now you've broadened the biological explanations of everything to the quantum level. You're doing biophysics. You're doing quantum interface within your thinking of how you do it. And so when you get to frequency in water, you're really right up against the concepts of intention in water. And frequency in water, how it picks it up as it comes through the earth, weaving its way through those cracks in the earth, magically picking up the memories and minerals along the way. When you're bathing in mineral water, your body is communicating with that water. And so, but people forget that our bodies are 2/3 water by weight, but by molecular count, they're like 99% water. So when you're soaking in water, it's water soaking in water. The water in you is communicating to the water you're soaking in as to what your biological needs are. And the water that's there has everything and gives you what you need. So we're moving away from the absorption of mineral content as a substance that does all the magic to the absorption of the frequency or the charge of the water interfacing with the frequency and the charge in you, and that may be happening. So that's my current thoughts. To answer your questions, how does it work?
Well, I like that because that tells me in my own filters that the water holds the divine blueprint of who we are. And when we put ourselves in it, it corrects any unalignment that might be going on within our own bodies because it holds the blueprint of who we are.
And so, yeah, you're right.
I mean, that's a beautiful, emotional.
And going back to our creation story, Genesis, God hovering over the water, God mirroring over the water, God looking at the water. Is that the reflection of that blueprint on the water? Is water God?
Well, this is something that I would say is true because so I, of course, we know about Emoto. But the woman that I have been following in the last year and a half, Veda Austin from New Zealand, has absolutely blown my mind, and I'm sure millions of other minds as well. So Emoto, he basically said human consciousness can affect the molecular structure of water, right? He had all those tests of the water crystal, if you were saying hateful things, if you were saying loving things. But I think that as a student of his, she has taken it up to this higher level, which is that water itself is consciousness.
Yeah.
And because she and if you don't know who she is, I highly recommend spending some time looking at her work. Veda Austin, the one that blew my mind was she had an image of a sunflower. And what she finds is that when she freezes the Petri dish and looks under a microscope, the ice will absolutely mimic the image that was held either under it or next to it. However, with the sunflower, the image in the ice was the seed. And that was it. I mean, I'm sure I cried because I don't see how you can't feel the emotion that comes with remembering the beauty of what it is we're actually saying here and the deep and profound shift in reverence we can have. And that's what Emoto did. He gave us the opportunity to shift our perspective to a place of reverence that we can affect the quality of the water before it enters our body.
Yeah, water researchers in science have had a hard go at it. You know, they've often been vilified and shunned and stuff. When Emoto wrote his book, Messages in the Water, he did not go through the peer review process. He just published it. And so people were all upset about that because, you know, if he had gone through the peer review process, it would have been chewed up and
right. He never
spit
would have
out.
published it.
But he went that route. And he was also very much into consciousness and water. And he's the one that said water is God, you know. And so I wouldn't say Veda is higher than or I think they're in the same vein of expression of how your intention affects water and how your intention affects your healing.
And in the old design model, God is something external. It's a power outside of us. So if he's using that phrase, God is water, it could very well slightly cause a miss in this deeper understanding that you're bringing to the discussion today, that it's nothing outside of us. We are the very thing that we're talking about.
By molecular count.
Yeah.
We're almost all water ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's so, like, when you came to understand this truth, did that change you as well? Obviously, the water changed you, but was there this additional, mental understanding of what you were actually realizing that changed you?
Yeah, for me, my experience in 74 changed me. That blew me away. It's all spirit. It's all one. We're all connected. We're all in the same boat. If I shoot a hole through your side of the boat, I'm sinking with you. Mm-hmm. So it's all one thing. It's that singularity, that oneness. And so for a lot of the way I come to it is, does the information I'm learning resonate with something inside of me that resonates with truth? And if something aligns and resonates with truth, then I know it's right.
Yeah. Chris Devlin is my guest. He's the director of Advocacy and Outreach for the Balneology Association of North America. He's been on the board of directors there for about 15 years, a water steward without a doubt. And we're talking about water. We're talking about mineral hot springs, the healing properties and components of water, of the hot springs. Tell us where the hot springs water comes from.
There's a couple of theories and thoughts on that. One relates to what we've all learned in school as the water cycle, where water rains, it gets into the ground, filters down through the ground, goes deeper and deeper until it hits some interface with magma and heated rocks, and then comes back up. And we call that filtration springs. There's another school of thought that also talks about what's called primary springs, and that's where the crack in the earth happens and water is coming up from deeper. And when you get into that, you're now crossing into the realm of what people refer to as primary water. Primary water was first discussed by a researcher, Stephen Reese, I think his name was, and it got poo-pooed and pushed away, but it's been pretty much demonstrated enough times that it's hard for the mainstream to push it away. That basically, there's water in rocks. There's water in rocks. In the mantle, there's water within it. And how to get that water free from that takes some kind of technologies or supernatural interventions that allow that to free up. But then below that mantle, there's hypothesized to be more water than all the oceans combined.
At the core of Earth. And what could that possibly mean?
Everything from our rotations through space to seasons to how we change our thinking about shortages of water, how we change our thinking about abundance and stuff. I mean,
in what way?
Because we don't have to worry about it. We have it. We just have to access it.
And is that a good conclusion to have?
Yeah. Water is probably more of a distribution problem. Some places get it, some places don't. We don't, now you're getting back to how do we relate to our whole hydrosphere, if you will, of the atmosphere.
Because in the old design model, water is owned and sold. I wish more people could really understand the catastrophic outcome of bottled water and what it takes to create one bottle. But if you are a bottled water user, you might want to really reconsider your consumption of bottled water, because that's part of the trance of the old design model, that you have to buy bottled water to get good water. And it turns out it's really not. We don't always know really what the source is of all this bottled water. Then there's the whole aspect of plastics, nanoplastics that can pour themselves into the bottled water and then enter our own systems. I mean, what are your thoughts about why bottled water has become this multi-billion-dollar industry?
Yeah, bottled water has been around for a long time. I used to have an old bottle of the Saratoga water from New York and
Saratoga Springs. I mean, they still produce bottled water today.
And that had an old bottle of glass jar. They used to always come in glass jars. Plastic's a more recent phenomenon, but glass would be better to keep your water in than plastic. But the different springs they're all unique. Everyone's different. So people will gravitate or want or have access to waters from all over the world. You can get Fiji water in the Delhi,
right. Well, you can drive down the Seward Highway and pull over where that one, beautiful spigot is that people bring their 5-gallon buckets.
Yeah. Our water, municipal water, we have a Klutna Glacier in Anchorage giving us some of the best water in the world. But then we poison it with chlorine and fluoride before we give it to people in the tap. So people have to then remove that stuff before they drink it. And so the places that you go to get your water, they remove it for you, But the ways most people do that is with the reverse osmosis system. And then if you really want to get into it, you could distill it and get it out.
And I don't know what your, background is on fluoride, but it certainly is, a very heated topic. In the beginning, when fluoride was added to water, was there an authentic reason that had integrity in it for doing that?
I don't think so, but the reason that was told to us was that it would prevent and help dental cavities,
And does it?
Very, very minimally. And questionable at that. There's only one really study out of Africa that showed that it really did it. But if you can give them that, it might help on a minuscule level, that you give them that. But the flip side is when you look at the cost-benefit analysis, the harm that it could do, being a proven neurotoxin, is not worth it. You're better off just eating a little less sugar, brushing your teeth, and doing better oral hygiene technique.
The entity that's putting the fluoride and chlorine in our Alaskan water.
That's our state. Our state does it. There's a whole department of water, and they're sold on it. They're doubling down on it, and they're just holding the hard line that that's what it is. I don't know if it's protecting jobs or whatnot, but fluoride causes fluorosis in the bones and stuff, and just the same thing that hardens enamel can also cause the bone to, in certain amounts, can cause the bone to degrade, and it could cause death. There was a death in Hooper Bay when the water operator was putting too much fluoride in the, it's so many parts per million, and if you do too much, it can kill you, and a person died. The risk is too great. And to make all the rest of us have to get it out of our water. There's so much options for people that want to use fluoride. You got fluoride in the toothpaste, you got fluoride in tea, you got fluoride in lots of different things that you could use. You could even do a fluoride rinse if you want. They do it at dental offices. Why do we have to make everyone do it in their tap water? And
follow the money.
And it's so it's jobs, it's stuff that it's part of this whole thing that we scare people that your health will be better when really it's making it worse. There's lots of things like that.
907-222-1061 is the phone number if you'd like to call with a question or a comment about our conversation today about water, mineral hot springs. 907-222-1061.
Chlorine's a problem too. People when they talk, I have a hot tub. I use a hot tub. And they're saying they're doing balneotherapeutic approaches when they're hot tub, but most of those people are putting chlorine in there or some other kind of toxic substance, and it's all tied into the bacterial thing and the biome and everything. So
because when you go back to what you said earlier about the structure of water and how much our own body is made up of water and all that beautiful explanation that you offered, now it's like, okay, if whatever you're putting in the water, there is an absorption. But would you also say that things like chlorine cancel out the benefits that water brings to a soak or a tub?
Oh, that's controversial. Some of the bigger, larger pools that have hot mineral water piped into it, say like Glenwood Hot Springs, they do add a little bit of chlorine just to pay homage to the bactericidal nuts out there that say, you have to make everything sterile.
You just can't make nature run wild.
Yeah, and some great science, Ray Vore and others are doing stuff on how flow through. If you have a certain amount of flow through in your pool or tub, you don't need anything, and you're changing it out. There's no reason to do anything. One of the problems is big hot spring pools, which is how a lot of people access them, fall under the regulatory bodies of swimming pools, public swimming pools. They see them as the same, and so they treat them as the same. We need different kinds of measurements for natural hot spring
Wait,
pools.
you mean the overarching agency sees mineral hot springs in the same way they see pools?
Yeah. If hotels that have mineral water have a pool and they fill it with mineral water, but the state comes down and says, just like if they had a pool for guests to use, which they make them add chlorine to, they make them add it to the hot spring pool because that's what they do.
That's the mentality.
Yeah.
Right.
And but there's big cases that were fought. Montana had a big one. I got to meet the guy who was part of that. I don't know if he's still with us or not. He was in his 90s then. He was talking how it was a big fight to get them to get hot spring soaking plunges or pools out of the swimming pool regulators.
Yeah, honestly, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. And so,
and what's going on in Alaska? Can you talk to us about the map of hot springs in our own state?
Yeah. The geological group at the state, I don't know if they still publish it, but I have one that would fill a good size of your wall here. It's a map of Alaska with all the hot springs on it, and they're in little red stars. And I think there's over 1,500 in Alaska.
Really?
But the only ones...
Wait. 1,500?
I think so. Don't quote me on the exact
okay,
amount.
even 1,000...
It's a lot. But the only ones people know are Chena
Hot Springs.
and Circle and Manly, and ones that you could drive to.
Okay.
And so you can only drive to a couple in Alaska. Down southeast, they can get to them by boat pretty easy. There's a bunch of nice ones down there. But for the most part, most of the springs are inaccessible except by plane, foot, or cow machine.
And so even these hot springs, because I think we finished the question, but I want to make sure I'm understanding. The hot springs water is coming from the center of the earth? It's coming up from Earth?
There may be filtration involved in some of these too. The water cycle thing. But yeah, there's probably some there. There's a crack goes all the way down that you get some primary water in there.
What's the most incredible healing testimony you've heard about somebody soaking in mineral hot springs?
I'm involved with Alameda's a hot spring place, a retreat in Hot Springs, Montana. I got a chance to meet guests there from time to time. And one time I met this guy. He was in his 80s. I think he's on the other side now, too. I haven't seen him for a couple of years. But each year he'd come down. So I asked him, I said, I see you here every year you come down. I said, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I come down for a tune-up. And I said, what do you mean a tune-up? He goes, well, back in the 40s I came here because I had rheumatoid. I was crippled, all contracted and everything, and I couldn't farm anymore, and people were pretty much giving me up for dead. And someone said, you got to go down to that Camas hot spring aquifer and soak in that water. And so he did. And the way they used to do it back then is you went for 21 days. It was called the 21-day cure in English. You go for 3 weeks. You would and cure is our version. It comes from the German word Kur, K-U-R, which means course of therapy, a 21-day course of therapy where you soak. Usually you worked with your doctor or your balneotherapist, and they would give you the prescription, how much. His was soak as hot as you could take it for 2 times a day. Then the other 2 parts of the 21-day cure where you eat healthy, clean, usually plant-based food, and you rest. Turns out if you rest, eat clean food, and soak a couple times a day, it cures just about anything.
And this man had a healing.
He had a dramatic healing. And that's where the phrase is, up there they call it limp in, leap out. He leapt out. And so he would come back once a year, every year for a 1-week tune-up. That was all his own thing. So a lot of people that in the hot spring healing groups, it's a self-healing thing. You have to kind of do it yourself because the rules don't allow us to really promote it as a healing modality. So people have to do it themselves. So they educate themselves for places like Bana and others that you get the information, and you have to make your decision of your relationship with the water.
Have you ever heard of testimonials where the water healed things like PTSD? Not so much physical, though I'm sure it shows in the physical, but trauma.
Yeah. I mean, one of the stories I heard, I haven't been able to verify it with the tribe, the Confederate Salish Kootenai tribe down in Montana. One of their old stories that I heard but haven't been able to verify is an old chief was at the village and went off to do a vision quest, and he came back and everyone had been murdered by the cavalry. Everyone had been killed up. And he was in deep grief and said to Great Spirit, what can I do? This deep grief. And he was told to go soak in the waters there and was given where to go, which was the Camas hot spring aquifer. And he soaked in there, and it was associated with healing grief.
That's amazing.
And so a lot of the PTSD and stuff is really deep grief stuff, and can heal grief with water.
That I tell you, this is the whole point of the new design for living, because it turns out this idea of reimagining, it's also a remembrance. The idea that back in the mid to late 1800s, doctors were prescribing hot springs, soaks as part of one's healing is an important thing for us to remember today, not just so that we can see how far off the trail we have gotten when it comes to health and healing. I mean, this is a big topic in the new design for living, because part of it is this permission to reclaim our health, to reclaim our own cures, and to return to Mother Earth and the various remedies that she has already given us, including the hot springs. And that whole part of our conversation earlier about the molecular structure of water as it relates to our own beingness, as well as this idea of light, is something I'll go back and listen to, because it's very deep and it's very profound, but it also feels like very truthful.
I was soaking with somebody in hot sulfur springs in Colorado a few weeks ago. She had PTSD, and she was mentioning how she goes to that spring to lift up, and because of the lithium in the water. But the same token, she was thinking, it's absorbing through my skin. That's what's doing it. But it's really also the frequency of the lithium crystal in the water, talking with the frequency of the body the PTSD and the grief is giving off. And it's a two-way communication. There's two-way communication between the water and you. And that's where we get back to, is water alive? Yes. Is it conscious? Yeah, I believe so. At a minimum, even the people that can't get there have to give it that it does hold memory. And because crystals and crystalline structures hold memory. And so as the memories of what? Sure, as it comes up to the earth, the memory of the minerals, but what else does it hold in it? What other memories? And so as people remember who they are, membership in one, membership in the water, membership in God, that's what lifts you up.
I think it's also very profound to see these wonderful new nonprofits who are committed to cleaning our oceans. Mm-hmm. And our relationship to the water is due for a healing in and of itself. We take for granted the water, the earth, and in the new design model, we have deep and profound reverence. We understand that we have dominion as stewards with regards to Mother Earth and things like the oceans and the rivers and the water. And it's just a really amazing exchange that we're having when we can take it all the way back to the beginning and this idea of frequency and light as water. And this idea that water communicates to the water within ourselves. I mean, that's deep, but I love it.
Yeah, there's lots of groups working on it. Those big ones that you mentioned with the big operations on the oceans, but even in lakes and rivers, there's people doing stuff. I'm working now with a group, Clear Water Vision out of California, Russ Anderson's group, and he's doing a lot of work with Clear Lake there at the region of Mount Shasta, and doing a lot of work with intention. Can intention help purify? Can intention help raise frequency of water and help structure water? And when you structure, it seems like you don't necessarily get rid of some of the impurities, but you do a thing called transmutation, where you transmute the stuff into something that is now okay frequency-wise and structurally-wise in terms of molecular structure.
But the thing about that's so wild is you don't even have to vocalize it. You can literally put words. You see it, right? People have words on their... Is that enough to...
Yeah, intention can just be from your mind if you got a strong enough... if you've done some kind of practices that strengthen those kind of things. But a lot of times sound helps a lot. The frequency of sound is really helps.
So give me an idea. So I'm listening and I'm going, okay, I'm holding on to dear life for this conversation with these two people, but I'm interested. So what could be one or two things that someone could do to begin to heal the water that they're ingesting, that they're drinking?
Okay, a couple things you can do right off. It's like I mentioned before, if you're drinking tap water, you want to put it through a reverse osmosis filter first or distill it. But if you can't do that, you can get away a little bit with the Brita and stuff like that, the common things. But do a little filtering. Try to get some of the crap they put in there out of it.
Okay.
And then the next thing you do is you can structure the water. Now, structuring the water is a technology. It's a very low-level technology. Basically, when you look at a river running down a stream through the natural, it takes curves. The river curves. And water doesn't run in a straight line like through our pipes. And so it runs in natural curves. So a lot of the structuring technologies tend to try and make the water flowing through it take some curves around. And so there's Clayton Nolte has a website where he sells structuring devices. I use one of his for my drinking. I just pour it through, and I ask people, would you like a glass of structured water? And I pour it through his little funnel. But you can also do it yourself. You can get a cylinder and put some circular rocks in there and let it pass through. That'll give it a little bit of structure. But basically, when we talk about structuring water, we're talking about molecular structure. And what does that look like? And who knows? You need an electron microscope to look at that. But basically, the molecules of the water nest and cluster amongst themselves, and then with different clusters cluster together. that structured water, the theory is that that's more easily ingested into your cells, and it makes better. You get hydrated better if the water is structured, and the thinking, of whether it helps purify it or not is kind of controversial, but I believe it does through the process of transmutation.
What about the person who cannot buy any of these gadgets to make this happen? Let's go back to this intention and the word that one would use through these experiments that Emoto and this woman Beta Austin are doing. How would you do that on a daily basis that is doable?
Yeah, and again, if all you got is your intention, you still have a lot to work with there. And so say your prayer. Janet Abbott is the director of language for Bana, and she says if you're really stuck in a place and you don't know how the water, she goes, just say a prayer first. Mm-hmm. And turns out prayer and intention are a big part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, prayer and intention with water goes way back. I mean, the Ganges River, the Nile River, the Jordan River with John the Baptist. All these guys, it's all about how intention in water. In those cases, it's flowing water. So flowing is where you get your structure. You have to flow the water over something. You can probably make a little do-it-yourself with your own little pebbles in a thing, and as you pour your water into your pitcher, let it flow over that while you're maybe doing your intention. I
like to say in the morning, thank you for healing me.
Yeah. That you're setting it up. You're setting it up on a frequency level that is in spirit world.
Yeah.
And so when you bump it up to spirit world, now you're connecting on where water can help you.
Yeah, because part of the process of moving from the old design model to the new design model is this process of moving from separation and duality and outside of me to the interconnectivity of all of life within me. Right. And that is a beautiful journey from separation and duality to oneness and unity consciousness. And this kind of a conversation about water really stretches our limited thinking in a way that's absolutely necessary these days if we want to have a deeper and more profound relationship with this earth that is very much alive. I mean, clearly Mother Earth is shaking and quaking and is doing her own shedding in the year of the snake, let alone all the floods and the incredible storms, man-made or not, that are causing these incredible floods all over the world. So it's time for us to bring our awareness to water, have a greater sense of reverence for what it does, let alone this beautiful idea that water communicates on its own with the water within us, that all we have to do is get in it, and the communication happens effortlessly.
Yeah. Getting in a hot tub at a hotel with the swim-up bar and the babes in bikinis and stuff, it's kind of hard to get into the frequency level while that's happening if your mind is already preoccupied with separate thoughts. So you want to do the work to help everything along. It's not going to push your consciousness beyond something it doesn't want to be open
beyond
to.
the stimulation, right? You've traveled the world, I would imagine, with hot springs?
Yeah.
Really?
And
how many you got?
I don't know.
Over 100?
I don't know. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Over 100 different soaps?
Some great ones. Tatapani in Nepal is just wonderful. All through South America.
Do those countries tend to have a different relationship with the hot springs than we do here in America?
Yeah. But they haven't gotten so far away as our materialistic prison that we keep ourselves in. They don't have that because they don't have the same kind of standards that we have, and so it's probably a little bit easier to remember how you're connected to water. But I'll share one. We always think of Ethiopia so removed, so out there. One time I was going to a hot spring there, and I get there and I go over. I find a place to change into my suit, and then I'm walking towards the pool, and everyone's holding up their hands, no, and they're yelling at me. And I'm looking, and they're pointing, and they were pointing to the shower. There's like, how dare you get in here without showering your butthole first?
Wow.
And so it's like, it turns out showering before bathing is a very important thing to do.
Makes sense.
Because you cleanse your body, just like you cleanse when you're doing prayers or whatever.
I'll take it one step further. I would say throw some exfoliant in there, get all those dead skin cells off the surface of your skin, and then
scrub it.
Up. And
I mean, the Koreans, the Japanese, the Chinese, they really scrub before they go into their onsens.
I'm going to give you a new phrase: scrub it up before you tub it up.
Yeah, right. I like it. That's good. And I mean, in that whole stuff, there's a whole body of knowledge with showering and how it relates to the lack of a need for chlorine. If you just washed yourself before you got in your hot tub, it wouldn't be as bad.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Chris, for being on the show today and really expanding my thinking in a very beautiful and emotional way. And I think that's an important component of these kinds of conversations, to feel it in our hearts, because that feeling is what helps us remember who we are and this interconnectivity of all life. You wouldn't think you'd feel emotional about water, but yet today we have, and it's because of your sharing. And I super appreciate what you brought to the show today. We've been chatting with Chris Devlin, who is this wonderful director of advocacy and outreach for the Balneology Association of North America.
We call it BANA.
BANA.
BANA for sure.
And go check them out. They got beautiful articles. It's a wonderful, wonderful website. I highly recommend it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Camille.